Hello everyone. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time it is. That way, YouTube will keep pulling you into stories like this. Now, let the shadows take over. I've been a Costco member for almost a decade. I've hauled bulk snacks for road trips, fought through weekend crowds for those irresistible rotisserie chickens, and even stood in line like a fool for Black Friday electronics. Through all that chaos, I never once felt unsafe inside that massive warehouse. That changed last winter, on a night that still makes my skin crawl every time I drive past the Fort Collins Costco. It was mid-December, the kind of Colorado winter night where snow falls in relentless waves and the cold sinks straight into your bones. I'd worked late at the auto shop, my hands raw and aching from pulling a transmission out of an old Silverado. By the time I finally punched out, it was after 8 p.m., and my fridge at home was emptier than a Sunday liquor aisle. I figured I'd make a quick Costco run, grab some frozen dinners, soda, and cleaning supplies, then hole up for the weekend. When I pulled into the parking lot, it looked like something out of a horror movie. The plows hadn't touched the far side of the lot, leaving thick ridges of snow and ice. The wind whipped through the rows of cars, howling under the tall sodium lights that buzzed and flickered like they were seconds from dying. Most sane people had already stocked up before the storm hit. Only a few scattered vehicles remained near the entrance. I had to park way out by the overflow section, practically in another zip code. As I trudged toward the front doors, boots crunching in the snow, I got that weird feeling you sometimes get at night. The sense that someone's watching. I turned once, twice, but the lot was empty. Just wind pushing snow across the blacktop in ghostly trails. I told myself it was just winter playing tricks on me and went inside. The store was eerily quiet. Normally, even at closing time, there's a low hum of life. Cashiers chatting, forklifts beeping, shoppers arguing over which mega pack of cereal to grab. But that night, it felt hollow. My footsteps echoed under the high steel rafters. I only saw two other customers, both older folks slowly navigating the produce section. The rest of the cavernous warehouse seemed abandoned. I grabbed a cart and started down the wide main aisle, mentally running through my list. The plan was simple. Frozen meals, some soda, maybe a big bag of chips to survive the storm. Nothing complicated. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, their glow reflecting off the polished concrete floor. My boots squeaked with each step. It started when I turned down what I thought was aisle 14. I know that store like the back of my hand. Aisle 14 is usually stacked high with cleaning supplies, bulk detergent, endless paper towels, giant boxes of trash bags. But that night, something was off. Half the overhead lights were dead, plunging the long aisle into a sickly half-darkness. A thin sheen of moisture coated the concrete, glistening like a film of melted ice, and the air felt damp and cold compared to the rest of the store. My cart's wheels squealed as I pushed it forward. I slowed down, scanning for a maintenance sign or a blocked-off section, but there was nothing. Then I saw him. Halfway down the aisle, standing perfectly still, was a man. He was tall, easily 6'4", with a filthy brown jacket that hung off his thin frame like it hadn't been washed in years. His jeans were torn at the knees, boots caked with snow and mud. But it wasn't his clothes that froze me in place. It was the way he stood. Rigid, shoulders squared toward the shelves, head tilted slightly to one side, as though he was listening to something only he could hear. You good, man?" I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the dead aisle. He didn't move. I tried again, louder this time. "Hey, you okay?" That's when his head turned, but only his head. His shoulders stayed locked facing the shelves, while his neck pivoted toward me in a stiff, unnatural jerk. I swear I heard the faintest creak of bones straining. His face was deathly pale, the kind of sickly white you only see on someone who hasn't felt sunlight in years. His eyes were worse, dark, not just brown or black, but void-like, swallowing the fluorescent light around them. No reflection, just emptiness. Every instinct screamed at me to back away. Then, slowly, he raised his right hand. His arm trembled slightly, but his palm stayed open, fingers curling in a slow, beckoning motion. No words, no sound, just that cold, deliberate gesture. I bolted. I spun my cart around so fast it tipped onto 2 wheels and shoved it out of the aisle, boots skidding on the damp floor. My heart slammed against my ribs, breath ragged as I raced back into the main walkway. I turned, expecting him to be following me. The aisle was empty. Bright, normal lighting. The floor was dry. No sign anyone had been there at all. I stood there shaking, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe it was a shadow, a trick of the lights. I forced myself to take a few deep breaths, wipe the sweat from my palms on my jacket, and keep shopping. But the feeling didn't leave. Every time I turned a corner, every time I reached for something on a shelf, I felt eyes on me. That gnawing, primal sensation of being stalked. By the time I hit the frozen foods, my nerves were shot. I grabbed whatever meals I could reach, tossed them into my cart without looking, and made a beeline for the checkout lanes. Only a handful of customers remained. 2 cashiers stood at their registers, chatting idly as they scanned items. Everything felt almost normal again. Then a voice cut through the air, soft but sharp as a blade. "Don't leave yet." I froze. It came from behind me, low and rasping like someone who hadn't spoken in years. I turned slowly, praying it was just another shopper. It wasn't. Standing by the tire center near the side exit was the same man from aisle 14. Only now, his brown jacket was gone. He wore a stained white shirt clinging to his gaunt body. Wet boot prints led from where he stood, but the floor around him was completely dry. My throat locked. I shouted toward the registers, "Hey, somebody call security!" Neither cashier reacted. The remaining customers went about their business like they hadn't heard me at all. The man stepped forward, boots making no sound. "You saw it?" he rasped. "I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered, backing toward the main exit. His head tilted again, that same jerky, inhuman angle. "Aisle 14, he whispered, like it was some kind of secret meant only for me. That broke me. I abandoned my cart and ran. The automatic doors dragged open as if they didn't want me to leave. Cold air blasted my face as I sprinted into the snow. When I finally reached my truck, lungs burning, I turned to look back at the building and nearly screamed. Through the massive front windows of the Costco, aisle 14 was visible. Every other aisle glowed under normal lighting, but aisle 14 was pitch black, a gaping wound in the middle of the store. And there he was. The man stood perfectly still, his pale face pressed against the glass, one skeletal hand splayed wide, head tilted in that unnatural way, watching me. I fired up the engine and tore out of the lot, fishtailing through the snow, heart pounding so hard I thought it might give out. I didn't sleep that night, didn't eat the next day. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I had to know if someone else had seen him. That afternoon, I called the store and asked to speak with the manager. When I told him what happened, he sounded confused. "Sir, we don't have an aisle 14, he said matter-of-factly. "Our layout jumps from 12 to 15. "Always has," I insisted. Told him exactly where it was. Told him about the damp floor, the broken lights, the man. He chuckled nervously, said, "Maybe I'd gotten turned around. Maybe stress made me imagine it. But I know what I saw. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. Sometimes, when I drive past that Costco after dark, the store is mostly dark. just a faint glow spilling through the windows. But every so often, I see it. A single dead stretch where an aisle shouldn't exist, and a tall, pale figure standing there, waiting for someone else to notice. I've always been an anxious person. My friends call me paranoid. My family calls me overly cautious, but I call it surviving. I lock my doors twice, check every window before bed, and never let my gas tank dip below a quarter. Maybe it comes from growing up with a father who worked night security at a mall. He'd come home with stories about the things he'd seen after dark, the way empty places felt alive, how shadows played tricks on your mind, how silence had its own kind of sound. Costco was supposed to be my safe place. As ridiculous as that might sound, that big, brightly lit warehouse calmed me. The rows of neatly stacked goods, the hum of freezers, the smell of baked bread drifting from the food court. It all felt like order in a chaotic world. I had my Saturday evening ritual down to a science. Earbuds in, list in hand, aisle by aisle until the cart was full. I even knew which registers closed early and which employees stayed late. That night last February should have been just another routine trip. It was cold and raining, one of those nights where you don't want to do anything but stay inside. But my pantry was empty, and I needed groceries. I left my house around 8:30 p.m., figuring I'd be in and out before closing at 9:30. I remember feeling oddly peaceful as I parked under the glow of the tall parking lot lights. The rain-slicked pavement reflected the store's red sign like rippling neon. A couple of cars were scattered near the entrance, nothing unusual for a late run. I pulled up my hood, grabbed my reusable bags, and headed inside, expecting the usual bustle of carts and chatter. But when I stepped through the sliding doors, it felt off. Costco is never quiet, even near closing. There's always a hum of life, a forklift beeping, employees laughing as they stock shelves, the muffled rumble of checkout lanes. But that night, it was silent. Not empty. There were a few other shoppers, but muted, like someone had turned the volume down on the world. I shook it off, telling myself it was just late, and started my list. Bottled water, frozen dinners, bulk snacks, cleaning supplies. About 30 minutes in, I was near the refrigerated section grabbing a bag of frozen broccoli when the first closing announcement came over the PA system. "Attention Costco shoppers," the woman's voice said cheerfully. "Our store will be closing in 10 minutes. Please bring your final selections to the front." No big deal. I'd closed the place out plenty of times before. I tossed the broccoli into my cart and headed toward the checkout lanes. Normally around this time, employees start guiding customers toward registers. But as I walked the wide main aisle, no one approached me. I didn't even see staff at the self-checkout or exits. "Hello," I called, pushing my cart slowly past the empty registers. My voice echoed off the high steel beams above. "Anybody still here?" No response. I parked my cart and walked toward the front doors. Normally, even after closing, the glass panels slide open for late stragglers. This time, they stayed shut. I waved my hand near the sensor, pressed my palm against the glass. Nothing. I could see the dark parking lot outside, rain still falling in sheets. But it felt like looking through a display window at another world. A nervous laugh slipped out of me. Maybe I'd missed an employee sweep. Maybe security would come any second to walk me out. I pulled out my phone to call the store's front desk. No signal. Not low bars. Nothing. Dead. My watch read 9:37 p.m. The store had officially closed 7 minutes ago. That's when the lights flickered. Not a full blackout, just a pulse. Fluorescence humming loudly, dimming for a heartbeat, then snapping back to brightness. It was enough to send goosebumps racing up my arms. "Hey," I called, louder this time. "I'm locked in here." From deep in the warehouse, somewhere past the bulk cleaning supplies, a metallic clang rang out, like a shelf falling, sharp and echoing. I froze, listening. "Hello," I yelled again, voice trembling this time. No answer. Just silence. And then a slow creak, like something shifting on its own. I should have stayed near the exit. Should have waited for a manager or security guard to find me. Instead, against every ounce of better judgment, I started walking toward the sound. My sneakers squeaked softly on the polished concrete as I passed rows of towering pallets stacked with detergent and paper towels. The clang came again, farther away this time, pulling me deeper into the store. The overhead speakers crackled suddenly, making me jump. A man's voice whispered through them, distorted and almost drowned in static. "Still shopping?" The words slithered down my spine like ice water. I spun around, scanning the aisles. "Who's there?" I shouted, voice cracking. No reply. The intercom stayed dead silent. I turned toward the employee door near the tire center and yanked on the handle. Locked. Another door near the pharmacy, also locked. Every exit I tried felt sealed, like I'd been deliberately trapped. Chest heaving, I stumbled back into the main aisle and caught movement near the far end of the warehouse. At first, it was just a shadow gliding across the floor. Then, it stepped into the light. A man in a Costco vest. Tall. Thin. His face was obscured by the brim of his cap. He was pushing a flatbed cart stacked high with unmarked cardboard boxes. Relief washed over me. Finally, an employee. I started toward him, shouting, "Hey, I'm stuck in here! Can you unlock the door?" He didn't answer, didn't even turn his head. Just kept pushing the cart, metal wheels squealing faintly, until he disappeared behind a towering stack of bulk toilet paper. I jogged after him, turning the corner into the next aisle. Empty. No man, no cart. Nothing. My breath hitched as I backed away slowly. The lights flickered again, brighter this time. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the air. A cold draft swept past me, but none of the bay doors were open. Then, through the intercom again. "You shouldn't be here." I spun in every direction, voice shaking. "Please, just let me out. I don't want any trouble." Silence. I ran, weaving through aisles until I found myself near the food court. The chairs were flipped onto tables, soda machines powered down. Except, on one table near the window, a slice of pepperoni pizza sat on a paper plate, steam curling faintly upward. I hadn't heard ovens running. There were no staff inside. Someone, or something, had just made fresh pizza. I stumbled backward, bumping into a rack of bottled water. The clatter echoed like a gunshot. And from somewhere near the refrigerated section, a voice, not through the intercom this time, but carried through the vast empty warehouse, answered. "You'll spoil the food." My head whipped around. The man in the vest stood at the end of the aisle, cap still shadowing his face. But now, his posture had changed. He wasn't pushing a cart. His arms hung at his sides, fingers twitching slightly. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice out in a trembling plea. "Please, just unlock the door. I don't want to be here anymore." He tilted his head, not like someone trying to understand, but like a bird, quick and jerky. And then, without warning, he sprinted toward me. I ran. I tore past the bakery, past the closed registers, my shoes sliding on polished concrete as I dove behind a stack of massive dog food bags. My breath came in ragged gasps. Footsteps thundered past my hiding spot, then stopped abruptly. Silence. I stayed crouched, every muscle screaming for what felt like hours. When I finally dared to peek over the top of the display, the man was gone. My legs barely worked as I crept toward the front doors again, praying they'd opened. No luck. My phone still dead. My watch ticked past 10:15 p.m. And then I saw him again, this time on the second level, near the manager's office windows. He stood perfectly still, staring down at me. Even from that distance, I could feel the weight of his gaze, cold and deliberate. He slowly raised one hand and pressed his index finger to where his lips should be. A silent command. "Don't scream! Don't move!" I bolted anyway. This time, I sprinted to the fire exit near the loading docks. When I shoved it open, a deafening alarm blared, echoing through the warehouse. Rain lashed my face as I stumbled into the dockyard, sprinting until my lungs burned and my car came into view. When I dared to look back, the alarm had gone silent. The fire door was closed again. And in the manager's office window above the main entrance, he stood motionless, watching me leave. The next morning, I returned with my brother. I couldn't face going alone. We asked for the store manager, explained what happened. They reviewed security footage from the night before. There was nothing. The cameras showed me wandering the store alone, shouting into empty aisles, even running from something that wasn't there. The fire exit alarm never triggered. The manager looked at me like I was insane, but promised I wasn't banned or anything. He said I probably had a panic episode from being locked in. But I know that's not what happened. I canceled my membership that afternoon. Now, every time I pass that Costco at night, I glance at the second-level windows. There's always a faint glow there. And sometimes, when the rain hits the glass just right, I swear there's a figure standing still in the shadows, watching. Before we jump into the next story, if you're enjoying these creepy tales, hit that subscribe button. We've got fresh horror chills waiting for you every night. When I got hired at the Costco in Brookhaven, Georgia, I thought my life was finally turning a corner. I was 23, broke after a rough breakup, and desperate to find stability. My cousin Anthony had been working there for years and told me the warehouse was always hiring. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, decent pay, and came with a chance to move up. After years of bouncing between temp jobs and sleeping on couches, that sounded like salvation to me. For the first few weeks, everything seemed normal. I stocked shelves, unloaded trucks, and even learned to work the registers when they needed an extra hand during rush hours. There was a rhythm to the place, a comforting hum of forklifts buzzing down the aisles, carts clattering against concrete, the familiar smell of baked bread drifting from the food court. For someone like me, who hated unpredictability, Costco was perfect. Except for one thing: Richard Hale, the warehouse manager. Richard had been there for decades, starting as a lowly stocker before working his way up to running the entire warehouse. He was in his late 50s, tall but hunched, with a graying beard and pale, exhausted eyes. Everyone respected him, but there was something about him that didn't sit right. He had this nervous energy, constantly glancing at the doors, flinching at loud noises, and muttering under his breath during long shifts. One thing everyone noticed: he hated leaving doors open. Even during big deliveries, he'd shout at us to close the loading dock quickly. "Don't let it breathe," he'd bark. And though nobody knew what he meant, we all learned not to question it. Another strange thing: Richard never left before midnight. While other managers clocked out an hour or two after closing, Richard stayed for hours, sometimes until dawn. We joked that he lived in the warehouse, but there was an edge to that joke none of us could explain. He seemed chained to the place in a way that went beyond just being a dedicated employee. A month into the job, I started noticing odd things. Late at night, when I stayed to finish unloading shipments, I'd hear Richard talking softly to himself in the back storage area. Not casual muttering. The tone sounded like pleading. One night, Anthony and I stayed until close, stacking a massive shipment of paper towels. As we worked, a sharp metallic clang rang out from the condemned section of the warehouse, a part of the building that had been sealed off years ago due to structural issues. Anthony froze mid-lift. "You hear that?" he whispered. I nodded, my stomach tightening. We crept toward the noise and found Richard standing by the massive rolling door that led to that condemned section. Chains crisscrossed the door, and a heavy padlock sealed it shut. Richard pressed his trembling hands against the steel, whispering through gritted teeth. "No more tonight. Stay in there. Stay in there." "Richard?" Anthony called cautiously. Richard spun around like a man caught committing a crime. Sweat soaked his brow despite the warehouse chill. "What the hell are you doing back here?" he barked, his voice cracking with something that felt closer to panic than anger. "Just unloading," Anthony said carefully. "We heard you talking." Richard's eyes darted to the door behind him before settling on us with a haunted look. "You boys don't come back here, ever, if you know what's good for you." He stormed past us, muttering, and disappeared into the shadows of the warehouse. Anthony and I stood frozen, unsure of what to say. We didn't report it. We didn't even talk about it again that night. But something changed in me after that moment. Over the next week, Richard's behavior got worse. He stopped eating lunch, his hands shook constantly, and I caught him staring at that chained door more than once. Sometimes, I'd find him standing there long after everyone else had left, just listening. Other times, I'd see his lips moving as though he were speaking to someone, even when he was completely alone. One evening, I stayed past closing to finish shelving in the frozen food section. It was well past midnight when I heard it again, a metallic bang echoing from the condemned area. My pulse spiked, but I couldn't stop myself. I followed the noise, weaving through pallets of bottled water and bulk snacks until I reached that same door. It rattled violently in its frame, as if something enormous was slamming against it from the other side. The chains groaned, straining against the pressure. Richard was already there, braced against the steel with his entire body, crowbar in hand. His face was ashen, drenched in sweat. "Stay calm," he whispered to himself, voice quivering. "Not tonight. Not tonight." "Richard!" I shouted before I could think. He whipped around, eyes wide with terror, like I'd just caught him bleeding out. "I told you to stay away," he snapped. "What's in there?" I asked, my voice cracking from fear. For a moment, his shoulders slumped, and he looked like a man crushed under invisible weight. His lips trembled as he said quietly, "Something I should have never let in." Then, without another word, he stormed off, leaving me alone with the rattling, whispering door. I didn't sleep that night. My mind spun through every possible explanation. Rats, faulty beams, even some vagrant sneaking in. None of it made sense. The next day, Anthony told me Richard had asked to see me in his office. Richard's office was a cramped, dimly lit room tucked behind the employee break area. The blinds were drawn, and the only light came from a flickering desk lamp. He gestured for me to sit, but didn't look me in the eyes. "I need to tell someone," he began, voice hoarse. "Someone who might believe me. I've been doing this too long." I leaned forward, my chest tightening as he spoke. 20 years ago, before that section was condemned, Richard had been closing up when he heard a child crying in the back corner of the warehouse. He searched for hours, following the sobs, until he stumbled upon a hatch in the floor he swore had never been there before. When he opened it, something climbed out. It wasn't a child. Richard's hands shook violently as he recounted how he barely managed to slam the hatch shut, sealing the thing inside. In the days after, employees started hearing whispers through the vents, voices mimicking people they knew. Tools went missing. Shadows moved where no one was standing, and the air near that section felt wrong, heavy. One night, the thing almost got out. Richard welded the hatch shut and padlocked the rolling door. He invented the story about structural issues to keep others away. But it never stopped trying. Over the years, it grew stronger, smarter. It called to him late at night, sometimes with his wife's voice, sometimes as his long-dead mother. It promised to bring them back if he'd just let it breathe. Richard stayed every night, sacrificing his health, his family, his life to keep it sealed. As he finished, tears welled in his tired eyes. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," he whispered. "But someone has to." Before I could respond, a loud metallic scream shook the building. The warehouse alarm blared, and the sound of chains snapping echoed down the halls. Richard's face went pale. "It's trying again," he said, grabbing the crowbar from behind his desk. "Stay here. Do not follow me." But I did. I trailed him through the darkened aisles until we reached the condemned door. It bulged outward, as if a massive force were pressing against it. The chains flew apart one by one, clattering to the concrete floor. Through the widening gap, a shifting darkness writhed unnaturally, and from within, a voice spoke softly, sweetly. "Richard, let me out. Don't you miss her?" Richard sobbed openly, tears streaming down his weathered face. "It's not her," he whispered, voice breaking. "It's not her." The pressure surged, the door groaning. Richard turned to me, desperation in his eyes. "Tell them I tried," he said. And before I could stop him, he shoved me backward, wedged the crowbar into the doorframe, and stepped inside the darkness. The door slammed shut with a final, thunderous clang. The rattling stopped. I screamed his name, pounding on the metal until my fists bled, but it wouldn't open. By the time other employees arrived, the condemned section was sealed again as if nothing had happened. Richard never came out. Corporate called it a disappearance and replaced him within a week. But late at night, when I'm stocking shelves alone, I still hear faint banging from that back door. And sometimes, if I stand still enough to really listen, I swear I hear Richard's broken voice whispering my name from the other side, begging me not to make the same mistake he did. I wasn't supposed to work nights. I was a cashier at the Costco in Syracuse, New York, doing mostly daytime shifts while juggling college classes. But one weekend last spring, my manager asked if I could cover a night inventory shift. They were short-staffed, and it paid double. I figured it was easy money, just counting boxes with a couple of other employees. I'd always liked the store when it was quiet. After closing, the place felt strangely peaceful. The massive aisle stood empty, shelves lined like soldiers, and without customers, you could actually hear your own footsteps echo under the high steel rafters. I thought it would be a simple, boring shift. It started out that way. There were 5 of us working. Me, a couple of stockers named Ben and Carla, and 2 managers, Jonah and Jessica. We clocked in at 10 p.m., set up near the electronics section, and started scanning pallets with handheld devices. We made jokes, drank too much vending machine coffee, and tried to stay awake while counting what felt like endless stacks of TVs and bulk snacks. Everything was normal until around 1:30 a.m., when we heard a loud crash from the far side of the warehouse. At first, we thought it was just a pallet falling over. It happens. Jessica sighed and told Ben to check it out. 5 minutes passed, and he didn't come back. Jonah radioed him, but there was no response. "I'll go," Carla said, rolling her eyes. She grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the sound. Another 10 minutes passed. No Carla. Jessica frowned. "All right, stay here," she told Jonah and me. "I'll get them." The 3 of them never came back. Jonah and I stood in the electronics section, staring at each other, the silence of the massive building pressing in on us. My stomach twisted. "This isn't funny," I said. Jonah shook his head. "They're probably screwing around." But his voice lacked confidence. He pulled out his radio, tried all 3 of their channels. Static. Finally, he muttered, "Let's just check." We moved down the aisles, flashlights slicing through the darkness. The store at night felt different. Hollow, cavernous, and wrong. The smell of cleaning chemicals hung in the air. Our footsteps echoed too loudly. Every creak of metal shelving made me flinch. We reached the far side of the store, near the loading docks, and saw the first sign something was wrong. Ben's handheld scanner lay on the floor, its screen shattered, as if it had been dropped mid-run. Carla's flashlight was a few feet away, flickering weakly, but there was no sign of them. We turned a corner near the freezer section, and that's when we heard it. A loud, metallic screech, followed by frantic footsteps pounding the concrete. "Run!" Jessica's voice screamed from somewhere in the darkness. "Run! Now!" Jonah and I froze, my heart jackhammered. Then Jessica appeared from the shadows, wild-eyed, sprinting toward us. Her uniform vest was torn, her hands bloodied. "Go!" she shouted. Jonah grabbed my arm and we bolted. Behind us, something roared. Not like a lion or a bear, but something mechanical, jagged, like metal grinding against metal. The sound rattled my teeth as we tore through the aisles, knocking over displays and sending products clattering to the floor. We didn't stop until we reached the front of the store. Jessica slammed into a wall, gasping, and tried to catch her breath. "What the hell was that?" Jonah demanded. Jessica's hands shook as she pointed back toward the docks. "I don't know. I think it came from the underground storage. It's huge, and fast." "Where are Ben and Carla?" I asked, my throat tight. Jessica's face crumpled. "Gone. It got them." Before we could process that, a deafening crash shook the floor. Shelving toppled somewhere behind us, metal screeching like nails on a chalkboard. The air filled with dust. Jonah grabbed his radio and screamed for security. No response. Then the lights went out. Total darkness swallowed us. Jessica fumbled with her flashlight, but it flickered uselessly before dying. The only sound was the steady clunk. Clunk. Clunk of something massive walking toward us. We ran blind, using muscle memory to navigate the aisles. My shoulder slammed into metal racks, my knee bashed against a pallet. But adrenaline kept me moving. Somewhere behind us, a shelf collapsed with a thunderous crash, followed by that unearthly metallic roar again. We reached the food court area and crouched behind overturned tables, gasping for air. Jonah whispered, "We have to get to the emergency exit by the pharmacy." Jessica shook her head violently. "It's near the docks." "Near that thing? No way." Another crash echoed through the warehouse. This time, it was closer. Suddenly, a beam of light swept across the food court. My heart leapt. I thought it was security. But then I saw Ben staggering into view, his uniform shredded, face pale and bloodied. He stumbled toward us, eyes wide with terror. "It's right behind me," he croaked. Before anyone could move, something enormous slammed into him from behind, flinging him like a rag doll. He crashed into a stack of shopping carts with a sickening clang and lay still. The thing stepped into view, illuminated by the faint glow of emergency lights. It was tall, easily 8 feet. Its body a grotesque fusion of twisted steel and shredded plastic. Like the warehouse machinery itself had come alive and fused with something worse. Glowing red slits, where eyes should be, scanned the aisles. Massive clawed hands dragged along the floor, leaving gouges in the concrete. It let out another metallic roar and charged. We ran for our lives. Shelves toppled behind us as the creature plowed through, sending towers of merchandise crashing down. I tripped over a fallen box, scrambled up just as Jonah grabbed my hand and yanked me forward. We reached the emergency exit near the front registers. Jessica threw her weight against the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic flared in her eyes. "It's chained!" she screamed. The monster's footsteps thundered closer. Jonah yanked at the chain, ripping his hands open. I grabbed a metal rod from a nearby display and tried to pry it off. It wouldn't break. Jessica turned, tears streaming down her face. "Go without me," she whispered. "No," Jonah shouted. But Jessica was already running. She grabbed a fallen fire extinguisher and bolted toward the creature, screaming to get its attention. The red glow of its eyes shifted to her, and it let out an ear-splitting screech before barreling after her. Jonah and I stood frozen, horror choking us, as Jessica disappeared into the shadows with the thing chasing her. We heard her scream once, then silence. With shaking hands, Jonah finally snapped the chain. We burst through the exit into the freezing night air and collapsed in the parking lot, sobbing and coughing on dust. When police arrived hours later, they found nothing. No destroyed shelves, no sign of Ben, Carla, or Jessica. Security footage showed only Jonah and me running through empty aisles, shouting at nothing. Costco corporate called it a hallucination episode caused by exhaustion. They offered us severance packages to quietly resign. But Jonah and I know the truth. Some nights, long after the store closes, we drive past that Costco and see flickers of red light moving in the windows. And every time, I hear Jessica's last scream in my head, knowing she sacrificed herself so we could escape, only for that thing to still be roaming inside, waiting for the next night shift. I started working the return counter at Costco because I thought it would be easy. Scan receipts, refund customers, smile politely. It was mundane compared to unloading freight or stocking shelves in the freezer section. For 3 years, that's exactly what it was, until last fall, when the returns changed forever. It began on a normal Tuesday morning. I had just finished helping a woman return a broken vacuum when a man approached the counter. I'd never seen him before. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, wearing a rumpled blue button-up and holding nothing in his hands. No box, no receipt, nothing. "Need to process a return," he said flatly. I forced a polite smile. "Sure. What are we returning today?" The man looked me dead in the eyes. "Me." I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Process it," he said again, sliding a small paper slip across the counter. It looked like a regular Costco return ticket, except it wasn't filled out from merchandise. Instead, in block letters, it said, "Return. Customer. Martin Webb. Reason, unsatisfactory." I glanced around, expecting someone to jump out and say it was a prank, but no one was near us. The store was quiet. Martin stood motionless, his expression empty. "I can't process people," I stammered. His face twitched into the faintest hint of a smile. "You can. Just scan it." Something about his voice froze me. Against every instinct, I scanned the slip. The register beeped once, then printed a receipt. Martin sighed like someone settling into bed after a long day. He turned, walked toward the exit, and vanished before reaching the door. 1 second he was there, the next he wasn't. I stood frozen. A coworker named Elena asked what happened to the customer I was helping. When I said, "Martin Webb," she gave me a blank look. "There's no Martin Webb," she said slowly. "Never has been. You okay?" That night, I couldn't sleep. I searched every system, purchase records, membership logs, surveillance footage. There was no Martin Webb. No trace he'd ever existed. Only I remembered him. A week later, it happened again. This time, it was an elderly woman named Doris. She walked up clutching the same kind of return slip. "Need to be processed," she whispered, eyes glistening with tears. "It's time." I begged her to explain. She only shook her head. "You'll understand soon." I didn't scan it. I couldn't. I slid it back and told her I refused. She looked relieved for a brief second, until a man in a black suit stepped out from an unmarked door behind the counter. I'd worked there 3 years and had never seen that door open. The man's face was blank, his eyes cold, He held out a tablet, nodded toward Doris, and said in a voice that made my blood run cold, "Process her. Now." I hesitated. He leaned closer, whispering so only I could hear, "Refusal means substitution." When I didn't move, he placed another slip on the counter. It read, "Return. Employee Daniel Ward. Reason, non-compliance." That was my name. My hand shook as I scanned Doris's slip. The receipt printed, and before my eyes, she dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind only her cane, which clattered to the floor. The suited man picked it up, handed it to me without expression, and disappeared back through the unmarked door. I ran to Elena, desperate for someone to remember Doris. Elena tilted her head. "Who's Doris?" she asked. That's when I realized this wasn't just happening once or twice. This was deliberate. Costco wasn't just taking back blenders and TVs, they were returning people. Over the next month, more returns came in. Sometimes customers, sometimes employees. Always with slips, always saying it was their time. And each time I scanned one, they vanished, erased from existence, leaving me as the only person who remembered they were ever real. At first, I tried to save them. I'd pretend the scanner was broken or hide the slips. But every time I did, the man in the black suit appeared, holding a return slip with my name. I was being forced to process these people, turning me into a silent executioner. I started having nightmares. Whole crowds of faceless customers queued at my counter, chanting, process us," while my own hands, moving on their own, scanned slips nonstop as screams echoed into nothingness. Then, one Friday evening, everything changed. Elena, my closest friend at work, approached the counter after her shift, pale and trembling. Without a word, she slid a slip toward me. "Return employee, Elena Marquez, reason expired." "No," I whispered, heart pounding. "What is this?" Tears filled her eyes. "I've seen them watching me," she said shakily. "I heard them say my name in the break room. Voices that weren't human. I don't know what's happening, Daniel. But if I don't do this, they'll send you instead. Please, you're the only one who'll remember me." I shook my head violently. "We'll fight it. We'll go to the cops. We'll tell someone. No one will believe you," she said softly. "They won't even know who I am once I'm gone. Just don't let me disappear for nothing. Please, remember me." The scanner felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hands. My vision blurred with tears. The suited man appeared again, silent, watching from the doorway. Elena reached out, squeezed my trembling hand. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm ready." With a choked sob, I scanned the slip. The receipt printed, fluttering to the counter. Elena's form shimmered like heat waves and faded away, leaving her employee badge behind. The suited man stepped forward, picked up the badge, and placed it gently in my palm. "Good," he said coldly. "Efficient." I broke. I screamed at him, demanded answers, begged to know why this was happening. He only smiled faintly and said, "Returns are policy. You process. That is your role." Then he disappeared again. Weeks passed. My body worked on autopilot, scanning slips, erasing people. I hated myself for every one. My reflection in the break room mirror looked hollow, lifeless. I barely spoke, barely slept. Then, one night after closing, I found something waiting on the counter. Not a person this time. A slip. No one was there to hand it to me. I picked it up with numb fingers. Return, employee, Daniel Ward. Reason, completed. The room tilted. I staggered back, breath catching. A faint hum filled the air, growing louder until the overhead lights flickered violently. From every aisle, faceless figures emerged. Past customers, employees, all the ones I'd processed. They surrounded me silently, their empty sockets fixed on my trembling body. Elena stood among them, her face blank. no trace of the warmth she'd once had. The suited man stepped out, smiling for the first time. "You've done well," he said, "but every return reaches its end." He held out a scanner identical to mine. "Process yourself," he instructed calmly. My hands refused. I shook my head, backing away, but faceless arms grabbed me from every direction, holding me in place. The man placed the scanner in my grip. "Policy," he whispered. With tears streaming down my face, I scanned my own slip, the receipt printed, falling to the floor. The last thing I saw was Elena reaching out to me as everything dissolved into darkness. I don't know what's left of me now, but every time you return something to Costco, every beep of the scanner, a faint whisper rides the static of the register. And if you listen closely, you'll hear it. My voice, begging you not to process it. I'd been working at the Costco in Bakersfield, California, for 8 years when everything changed. 8 years of clocking in and out. 8 years of pushing pallets, restocking shelves, and answering the same customer questions over and over again. People joke that working in a warehouse store numbs you, that the aisles blur together, that you stop noticing how massive and endless they feel. They're right. After a while, you don't think about it. You just move on autopilot, your body knowing the layout so well you could navigate it blindfolded. I thought I knew every square inch of that building. I thought nothing about it could surprise me, until the day the store turned on me. It was a Wednesday, mid-afternoon, the kind of shift where everything feels like it's moving in slow motion. I'd been assigned to restock aisle 31, the last aisle on the far side of the building where they kept the big snack packs, chips, candy, party-size everything. Normally, I liked working that section. It was quiet, far from the chaotic food court and registers. I could put my earbuds in, stack boxes, and get lost in thought without anyone bothering me. But that day felt different from the moment I pushed my pallet jack into the aisle. I remember stopping for a second and glancing around, trying to figure out why. It wasn't anything obvious. The lights hummed the same way they always did, casting the usual pale yellow glow. The shelves were neatly stocked, nothing out of place, but the air felt heavy, almost thick, like when a storm is about to break. My footsteps echoed sharper than usual against the polished concrete floor, bouncing off the towering steel racks that rose like silent sentinels on either side of me. I brushed it off as fatigue. I'd been pulling overtime all week and figured my brain was just playing tricks on me. I started stocking the lower shelves first, sliding shrink-wrapped cases of chips into neat rows. Normally, this task takes about 20 minutes, but after what felt like nearly an hour of working, I glanced back toward where I'd started and froze. The end of the aisle was gone, not far away, not hidden by stacks of merchandise. Gone. Instead of the usual open space leading to the main floor, the aisle stretched on endlessly, fading into a gray haze that swallowed everything. I frowned, blinking hard, trying to shake the feeling I was imagining it. I turned back toward the other end of the aisle, thinking maybe I was just disoriented. But that end looked exactly the same. Endless, featureless distance that seemed to stretch forever. My chest tightened. I told myself I'd wandered into the wrong aisle, that I'd been so focused on stocking, I'd somehow stepped into an unfinished section or new expansion. I grabbed my radio from my vest pocket and called for Mike, my shift supervisor. "Hey Mike, you near aisle 31?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Static crackled in response. I tried again. Nothing. I felt the first real prickle of unease crawl up my spine. Radios don't just die in our store. Even in the freezer section, where signals sometimes drop, you can usually get something. This was dead silence. I decided to walk it off. I pushed my pallet jack forward, my boots clattering on the floor as I moved at a brisk pace. I counted my steps. 20, 30, 50. Normally, 50 steps would take you from one end of an aisle to the other. But no matter how far I walked, the exit never came closer. When I turned to look behind me, the same endless haze stretched out in the other direction. My stomach churned. That's when I saw the cart. It was sitting off to the side, its metal frame rusted, the handle worn smooth with age. Inside, there were dusty boxes of cereal with packaging I hadn't seen since the 90s. A plastic bag held old receipts yellowed with time. And on top of the pile sat a Costco membership card. My hand shook as I picked it up. The card was scratched and faded, the logo long outdated. But the name printed on it was mine. Daniel Harper. Same middle initial. Same membership number. Except this card looked like it had been issued 40 years ago. I wasn't even alive when this card would have been made. My chest tightened as panic started to set in. I dropped the card and spun around, ready to sprint, when I heard it. A faint squeak echoing down the aisle. The sound of a shopping cart wheel. I froze, breath caught in my throat. Slowly, I turned toward the sound, and my legs nearly buckled beneath me. Far down the aisle, emerging from the haze, was a figure pushing a cart. At first, I thought it was just a customer. Maybe someone had gotten stuck like me. Relief flickered for a second, until I saw their face. It was me, not a twin, not a look-alike. Me. Same Costco vest, same boots, same faint scar above my eyebrow from a childhood fall. But older, much older. His face was lined with deep wrinkles, hair streaked with gray, shoulders hunched like he'd been carrying the weight of the world for decades. His eyes. God, his eyes were hollow, like someone who hadn't seen hope in years. He stopped about 20 feet away, the squeaky wheel of his cart falling silent. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, frozen in mirrored horror. Finally, he spoke, his voice hoarse and rough like sand scraping metal. "Don't go further," older me said, the words trembling out of him. "Turn around. Now." I shook my head, my voice a whisper. "What the hell is this? Who are you?" Older me's cracked lips curled into a bitter smile. "You know who I am. You just don't believe it yet." He glanced over his shoulder nervously, like something unseen was watching us. This place. It's not just a store. It feeds on time. Every step you take down this aisle keeps you here. Minutes out there. Years in here. I stared, struggling to process it. "That's impossible," I stammered. "I walked in 15 minutes ago." He shook his head slowly. "You've been here longer than you think. We all have." Before I could respond, a loud metallic bang rang out, reverberating through the aisle. The shelves rattled violently, snack boxes tumbling to the floor. A low hum filled the air, making my teeth ache. Older me's face twisted with panic. "It knows you're here," he rasped. "God help you." Adrenaline surged through me. I turned and bolted down the aisle, desperate to escape. My boots pounded against the concrete as I ran faster than I ever had in my life. But no matter how far I ran, the aisle stretched endlessly ahead. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed. But I didn't stop until I saw it. A faint end cap in the distance. Relief surged through me. I pushed harder, sprinting toward the exit, only to skid to a halt, heart plummeting into despair. The end cap looped back to where I'd started, and waiting for me was another cart. Another figure. This one wasn't older. It was younger. Barely 20. Fresh-faced, dressed in a brand new Costco vest like he'd just finished orientation. His eyes were wide, terrified. "You shouldn't have stayed," young me whispered, his voice shaking. "You should have run when you had the chance." From behind him came more squeaks, more carts. Figures emerged from the gray haze, one by one. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All me. Different ages, different versions. Some gaunt and frail, others bloated with despair. Some sobbing uncontrollably, others silent, eyes glazed over. A few whispered to themselves, endlessly stocking invisible shelves like broken machines. The sound of squeaking wheels and overlapping whispers filled the aisle, surrounding me in a suffocating wall of dread. My stomach twisted violently as the truth clawed its way into my mind. I wasn't the first Daniel to walk this aisle. Every version of me had been here before, and every one of them had thought they'd escape. Older me stepped forward again, shoving through the crowd. His hands trembled violently as he grabbed my shoulders. "You think you're special?" he hissed, his breath hot and ragged. "You think you'll break the cycle? We've been doing this forever. This aisle, it's the last thing you'll ever know." I screamed, thrashing against his grip, pushing through the wall of my other selves. They clawed at me, begging me not to leave, their voices overlapping in a maddening chorus. "Don't go. Stay with us. It's safer here. You can't escape." I ran, blind with terror, down a narrow side path that hadn't been there before. The shelves closed in around me, metal groaning as if alive, narrowing until I had to turn sideways to squeeze through. My vest snagged on jagged edges, tearing fabric. My breath came in panicked gasps, echoing off the steel walls. Finally, I burst through a heavy stockroom door and collapsed onto the cold concrete floor. When I lifted my head, I was back in the normal warehouse. Shoppers pushed oversized carts. Kids laughed. Employees worked like nothing had happened. Mike, my supervisor, walked past, frowning. "Where have you been?" he asked casually. "You've been gone a while." I stammered something about getting lost. He shrugged and walked off. I glanced at the clock. Only 15 minutes had passed since I'd started stocking. But when I caught my reflection in a polished metal panel nearby, my blood ran cold. My face was wrong. Older. Not by decades, but years. My eyes had that same haunted, hollow look I'd seen in the versions of me trapped in the endless aisle. And in my vest pocket, I felt something heavy. I reached in and pulled it out with trembling fingers. It was the rusted Costco membership card from before, the one that should have been impossible. I quit that night, thinking leaving the job would free me. But every time I step into a store now, even a simple grocery store, I see it. An aisle that looks too long. Shelves that seem to shift when I'm not looking. And when the store is quiet, when no one's around, I swear I hear it. The faint, rhythmic squeak of carts, hundreds of them, waiting for me to come back.